Instead, this becomes a very generic story of a drug user running from the law, and any potential subtlety is completely lost. But yeah, it's a very basic story. A bounty hunter catches up with the law. Catches up. It could have been a police officer. Catches up with a drug user. The drug user's girlfriend suddenly comes to the realization that they're never going to have the dream life that she wanted, and so she gives up on life and kills herself and the boyfriend rather than go to jail. That could have been a chance for actual thought provocation if they had stopped and actually let there be some real subtlety. Instead, what they do is the setup is perfect for there to be actual subtlety. Instead, what they do is they let the dialogue completely tell us slap us right in the fucking face with what's happening. Talk down to us like we're freaking idiots, and just simply tell a very bland story that we really don't have to think about because it's playing out exactly the way it seems to be playing out. There's really nothing deeper than the surface here. The only thing that is deeper than the surface is the one scene at the end of the series. I mean, at the end of the episode. Let's turn that off because oh god, the end sequence. The real folk blues. I'm so tired of that song. The one scene that actually had any real subtlety to it, and it actually made me stop and think for a second, was the scene where Spike looks out the window, out into space. He contemplates what happened. He had a very ghastly look on his face when he saw the drug dealer's girlfriend die. And then, for a moment, he seemed to be contemplating and reflecting his own humanity, actually feeling something again inside of him. And then Jet comes along and tells him the same lie about peppers and beef, which is, shows that this is just another day at the office for them. And instead of feeling something, he takes out his goddamn cigar, which is the symbolism of his taking all this shit in stride, which some people think is a sign of his ultimate badassness and his ultimate cool guy status. Really, to me, it's him giving up. It's his decision to completely numb himself inside and stop being a character. Stop being a feeling human being. Is when he takes up that fucking cigarette. I mean, he stares out at space. He goes, kind of like he's surprised at himself for a second. And then he picks up that damn cigarette. And it's like he's looking into... He's seeing the horror of life, and he's blinking. And he's deciding, you know what, screw it, I don't care. Deep down inside, on the surface, he may pretend to care. He tried to show some compassion to the woman, the drug dealer's girlfriend, when he was telling her to run away. He was letting himself, flirt with the idea of feeling something for her. And his taking up the cigarette at the end of the episode is his admission to himself that there's no point in feeling anything for her. There's no point in feeling anything for anything. It's Spike giving up on life, basically. And his reaction to it is to take everything, absolutely everything in stride, and become this walking corpse. Which goes back to the scene where he admits that he died once already. And that's an admission by the writers that the symbolism of Spike's character is that he's already dead. He's completely burned out inside, and he's completely dead. And that would make for an interesting character. That certainly sets up an interesting premise if he learned anything from it. That's the real tragedy of this show, is it set up a potentially interesting character. And all he does is smoke that damn cigarette and wallow in how little he feels. There's no life in him. There's no actual animation. Oh, he may act like he has some zest for life, but really at the end of the day he doesn't. And he doesn't really have any actual motivation to save people's lives. He takes everything in stride because he's decided to just shut himself off from the world. That would make for an interesting character if there were any development from it. But he stays this static, living corpse throughout the entire series and never really learns anything. He stays numb and dead inside, and we see him remain that way, completely unchanged and immutable throughout the rest of the show, acting like this, and that's not an interesting character. We really just saw the most interesting the most interesting Spike will act in this entire series, and he really, from the rest of from this point on, he will continue to just act like this, to act like somebody who looks like he's carefree and fun on the outside, but is in fact actually quite dead inside. He's hollow, and that's why he's not really a three-dimensional character. He's really a two-dimensional character, because the third dimension to his character is the fact that he's hollow inside, is that he's dead. Well, that's not a dimension. That's a state of being. That's character hiri-kiri. And that's why he's not interesting or likable. Because every core motivation he has for any action he takes is completely undermined by the fact that deep down he doesn't actually give a fuck. And that's why I cannot like this character, and I can't appreciate it. And if I'm giving the impression that he's really deep and that this actually has some meaning behind it, I really don't want to, because I'm talking about this in terms of symbology that I normally would not have to in any given episode of the series, except that this is the first episode of the series. And it has a lot more of the symbolism around Spike's character than most, if any, of the rest of the series has. Everything else that has to do with Spike is really just them slowly pulling the curtain back on Spike's backstory, which I could have told you about in the first 2 fucking minutes, because they really just spoil the entire story with that pretentious as all hell prologue. He drops a rose in the rain, walks away while flashing back, or flashing forward actually, because the writers just only had that footage of him fighting the people in the church that he hasn't fought yet, ready at hand for that flashback. So